Hi, this is Sharaz Walji again, and I'm here at Astral Connections with Jon Kelly. Boy, am I excited to have you here. He's an internationally renowned speech analyst, and he writes a column for UFO Examiner, and that's www.ufoexaminer.com, isn't it?
Examiner.com and the Vancouver UFO Examiner for Examiner.com.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, Jon. Tell me a little bit about your life first. About your life, your education.
I'm a Vancouver native. I was
Okay.
born and raised on the west side of Vancouver and had all kinds of different opportunities and exploring culture and knowledge. I actually pursued a career in music for a long time. I was professionally involved in music for 20 years.
Wow.
And I was written up in a national newspaper alongside some prominent musicians, including Jeff Healey. I was able to perform and interact with numerous people who had major recording careers who were based here on the West Coast. And when we were all young, we would play together. And who was to know, certainly I would never have known that so many of them would have such major careers.
Wow.
But my studies and training in music were very intensive, and I sacrificed a lot of other pursuits because I found so much fulfillment from those studies of sound and the different effects that they had. That I pursued in a sort of a mystical way.
So you went away from music and enjoyment of music to analyzing sound.
Well, and its effects as a performer, as an instrumentalist, I played the saxophone for many years.
Okay.
And the sound of that instrument has these reverberative effects on the body and the skeleton, and different effects on the mind and the hormones. But those weren't necessarily factors that I was studying. It was just I was experiencing different kinds of results, not only aesthetically through the music, but other kinds of benefits that I perceived. I mean, it was a great social environment. I was surrounded by talented people that I could interact with, and I had a lot of ambitions, performance-wise, to engage in creation of beautiful, beautiful music. But I didn't understand at that time really what that was really a training ground for me into studies that I would.
Yeah.
Go into later in my life. I thought at that time I was going to be a musician for I would have a lifetime career because I felt great dedication to it,
Right.
and I also felt that there was something very real happening.
So it was beneficial stepping stones in your journey, obviously.
Oh yeah, definitely. I grew as a person
Yeah.
in so many ways, and again I had so many opportunities given to me, performance and contact with great talents. It impacted me in my development as a young person, but that was to change. It was not to be, out of all of that group, I wasn't able to establish a recording career or anything like that. What happened to me was during my studies in New York, where I was taking private tuitions with some well-established performers and teachers there, I also took an initiation into yoga, and the Sanskrit mantras that people were practicing.
For example?
For example, Baba Nam Kevalam is a universal mantra with the meaning Baba meaning beloved and Nam name. Kevalam meaning only, but in a very philosophical way because it describes a state where cosmic consciousness and human consciousness merge. And join together.
Right.
The word yoga means union in that sense, and so remembering this unified state. In the sense that we all come from the same place and we're all going to the same destination.
To the same place, absolutely.
This Baba Nam Kevalam mantra was a very potent mantra, and one of the ones that we were encouraged to study in that particular yogic pathway that I undertook formally when I was training in music in New York.
How long were you in this formal training for?
Well, it was ongoing. That program, which is under the name of Ananda Marga, which means Path of Bliss, allows for 6 levels of instruction to civilian practitioners, people who aren't going onto a path to become renunciant full-time workers, which I stayed in the civilian world, but I did receive all 6 levels of instruction, what are called 6 lessons, out of a total, I believe, of about 33 levels of instruction. And I took those levels of instruction through renunciant monks who had trained internationally and were devoted in their practices, and they were engaged in ongoing social service projects in the Third World.
You must have found a connection because through the music and the sentient experience you had during the music, you must have had further sentient experiences in training of meditation, I would think.
What was happening was that I was having a lot of spontaneous, as an adolescent, I was having a lot of spontaneous spiritual experiences. and the music was facilitating that. Because I wasn't living necessarily a very sentient lifestyle. I was living the lifestyle of an average Western person,
Right.
including my diet.
Right.
But I was nonetheless, I had a lot of inner momentum that was driving these experiences through me. And I was left without a conceptual framework to understand phenomena such as Kundalini ascension that was taking place spontaneously, or experiences of spiritual entities in different visceral
Forms, yeah.
contact.
Right.
I was left without a framework within which I could really understand that. My last name Kelly is an Irish name, and the Irish are famously mystical and poetic and have a legacy of folklore.
Right.
But much of that has been undermined, in modern times.
Modern.
There's a great disconnect, the witch hunts of the
Right.
European times, and persecutions under the church, and all of these kinds of issues have challenged people's, authentic connection with the legacy of their spiritual past in these different cultures. And so my cultural framework, although I had access to different books, and I had a great interest in occult or spiritual phenomena from childhood, as a young reader, I read voraciously whatever was in the library. Nonetheless,
I can understand that.
Nonetheless, I was left really without a cultural framework and a philosophical framework, or rules of conduct in life that would help me to not only manage.
So it was broader than specific in a large sense, and you didn't pin yourself down to any specific form. It sounds like.
Well, I
philosophy.
was receiving experiences on a variety of levels. I had personal encounters with what's known as the Sasquatch here in the Vancouver region.
Wow.
On the Sunshine Coast when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
And there were physical dimensions to that contact, and there were inner dimensions to that contact that accompanied it as well.
So at 8 years old, that must be a fearful experience.
Well, it's very interesting, in fact, because it was quite tranquil. The entire
Wow.
exchange was in a state of entirely tranquil consciousness. There was no aggression or fear-inducing behavior. It was simply very close contact in the middle of the night in the forest, in a summer camp situation.
I remember as I was younger, I used to read books on Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and all the images seemed very calm. They didn't seem threatening in any way. So when you say that, I can relate to that.
I was able to make that determination at the time of contact whether I was in danger or not.
Wow.
But I did respond to it in a way that my method of coping with that strange scenario was to act as if nothing was wrong or nothing was really happening. I was able to make my observations, and I departed the scene quickly. But it induced a lucid dream that same night. I don't know if you really want me to go into, this is quite a story, and it may occupy our entire interview. But
no, please, it came up, so let's share it.
Well, the context was that my brother and I were at a summer camp, and we attended this camp, I believe, for at least 2 summers, and this is, I believe, at 8 years old. And the format of the camp was that the young campers would be segregated, and this is boys only, they would be segregated into cabins with supervisors, and then several cabins at a time would go out on different expeditions into the forest to learn, reading maps and using a compass and all the simple skills like Boy Scout or Cub Scout type skills. And so on the first expedition, my brother's group, my group, and I think perhaps a third group as well, we were all went several miles south of the main campsite along forest roads. So it wasn't a very difficult hike, but it was remote from. We were now out in the woods. And so we set up a lean-to, and there were several adult supervisors, of course, with us, and we had a meal and a campfire, and then everyone went to bed. And in the middle of the night I awoke and I needed to use the restroom. It was a moonlit night, so the visibility was very good. It must have been full moon because visibility was excellent, almost as good as daylight. So I walked out of eyesight of the camp so that no one would see me, and I found some bushes and stood and proceeded to relieve myself. And at that time I was surveying the area around me, and I became aware that there was a being not so far away from me at all, maybe only a few feet further away than you and I, who was crouched in the bushes.
Wow.
And what I perceived was the head and the shoulder of a juvenile Sasquatch, and the face was covered in hair, and I believe the eyes were like a dark brown, and a very large pupil. And I had this perception. I saw physically with my own eyes this being who was observing me as I was just conducting my business.
And another calm experience.
Well, and I said to myself, okay, I get it. Now I'll act like nothing's wrong because I don't want to excite them, and so on and so on. So far, this is all right. I better not do anything to agitate this situation. And so I quickly finished my business and walked away. I didn't run, but I walked quickly back to camp. I climbed into my sleeping bag and pulled the covers over my head. And then in that state, I had this lucid dream. In the dream, I had an encounter with what I could describe as a grandfather Sasquatch, but in the sense that not only did I see this was someone who apparently was wiser than me, but they were actually albino in the sense that they had all this white fur or gray fur, you know, just very distinct.
Okay.
And so I felt that they were conveying some kind of a lesson or instruction to me. I don't remember the sense of the lesson, other than I did feel I was receiving some kind of instruction. I was being brought into some kind of framework or cultural understanding from that community. That was, it was knowledge and education that I wasn't receiving at home or in the school programs. I was being brought into some kind of framework of knowledge or understanding.
Wow.
That I had the definite feeling.
And at that age that you can discern that, that's pretty amazing in itself.
Well, it was in the sense it was a very vital or highly energized experience. I mean, there was physical contact and there was a psychic dimension of contact taking place, and it was very clear within my mind that this had occurred.
Right.
So the way the story ended up was I told my brother at the time I awoke about what had happened the night before. He didn't have a lot to say about it, but it left him with some questions, I'm sure.
Of course, yeah.
So we proceeded back to the main campsite, and what happened was, when he got to his cabin, which was separate from the one I was staying in, he began to talk to his cabin mates about what I had said. And their counselor or supervisor overheard. Now this was a fairly large set fellow, and remember we're boys, we're pre-adolescent boys, we're not very big. This is a great big guy with a barrel chest, and he got infuriated when he heard what my brother said that I had told him. He marched over to the cabin where I was, and without even seeking the permission of the supervisor, he made this big announcement and came into the room and started blundering about with, "Who's been saying all this bleep, bleep, bleep about Sasquatches? I've been hiking and camping in British Columbia for 20 years and I've never seen anything." And so on and so on, and attempting to basically diffuse the whole situation,
right,
silence and suppress the witness.
Right.
So this huge debunking effort went on, and it was shocking to have to listen to that.
To follow all these experiences, doesn't it? A debunking.
Well, there's peaks and troughs, and so the high and the low, it all came together. But I did follow that line of instruction. I was intimidated to the point where I didn't feel it would be good to continue to discuss it or to protest. And so at the end of that camp session, there were two sets of cabins on that property. One was for summer camping, one was for winter camping. Someone amongst the supervising staff had a responsibility to check that all the winter cabins were locked down for the season before everybody left. And it was that individual who went to check on that place. And what he told my brother at the time of boarding the bus, this was conveyed to me by my brother when we got back to Vancouver. He told him, he said, I really didn't mean personally to come down on your brother about his experience or his story, but this is what happened to me. When I went to the winter cabins to investigate, to make sure everything was locked down, I found a pile of feces on the ground and a two-legged hairy animal walking in the distance. And so I was able to confirm that there were Sasquatch in the area, and your brother was more than likely, in fact, telling the truth. But I didn't mean to come down on him personally. However, if we allowed the children having these experiences to talk about them and raise that awareness to the parents when they got home, the parents would never send their kids here again.
Oh, jeez.
And so many years later, in the last several years, I had contact with a local Sasquatch researcher, and we went on a field trip together to do some filming. And his comments to me regarding that story were that there was more than likely a policy in place at that camp that children were having some kind of level of contact,
right.
But to preserve the integrity of their business, and perhaps maybe also guided by the religious philosophy, under which they operate, they were going to debunk every claim and to silence the witnesses in an attempt to preserve some kind of a false reality about the nature of what's really going on.